Thank you so much, Laura, for volunteering to do this. And Laura is certainly qualified. She is an active competitor and a trainer and an instructor. So she's well-rounded and very credible resource to speak to us tonight about this. So thank you, Laura, and I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I was asked to present about the competition horse and all the different points of making plans and what to do. So the first one that was the point of kicking, and everybody can see my screen, right? Okay. All right. So the first slide that that I have up here is requirements for getting your equine fit. The biggest thing is to make sure your horse is good health-wise, both physically and mentally. I mean, there's no point trying to get a lame horse fit. There's no point in trying to get an immature horse super fit right off the bat. So you want to make sure that they can handle what you're giving to them, both physically as well as mentally. And you have to know their level of fitness before you start, which is the second bullet there. A lot of people, you have a good competition season where you're going April through November, and then you give your horse the time off, or you unfortunately have to give them off because of the weather, because nobody has access to an indoor or whatnot over the winter. So you have to kind of take that into consideration, because for that second bullet, even if the horse has been working for 3-4 years, you're going to have some changes both physically and mentally as they age. You have the 3-year-olds that, this is so much fun, let's work, and then you get them at 5 and 6 years old, and they're going through that stage where you start to have the whole attitude changes, puberty, so to speak. I'm dealing with that right now with my 4-year-olds, and they're not who they were at 2 and 3 when I was starting them, and I know they're not where they're going to be at 7 or 8 after they've been working for 2 or 3 years and having a job and competing and getting there. So you just have to take all that into consideration, their physical state as well as their mental state, and where they are when you're going to pick up, getting them fit again after they've had time off, even if it's fit, you give them 6 weeks off after a competition season, and you have access to shows in January and February, but you stopped in, say, November, and you gave them a short break off. Or again, if you've given them, a break for, 5 months over the winter time, you want to make sure you know what you have before you start asking them to get fit. So that's the first slide. That's Debbie. Jamie said that we would probably stop and if there were any questions on any of the pages. Is that correct?
Yes, it can be very interactive. That's the way they have been. So
Okay.
People do ask questions during the presentation, and maybe give some of their perspectives and experiences.
Okay, and everybody can see except for the black box, correct? They can't see the Zoom box on the screen, right? Like I'm moving this. Oh,
yeah, no, they're just looking at your PowerPoint.
Okay, just a PowerPoint. I just thought of that. I was like, are they?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, before we move to the second bullet, does anybody have any questions as far as this first page goes for the requirements for getting them fit? I'll take that as a no. So we'll kick on to the next one. Helpful ways to get your horse fit. Biggest thing is have a plan. Like the beginning, even if you plan out, 2 months I want to do a training level, or 2 months I want to, go prelim or whatnot. Always have a plan. And that's very important on getting your horse fit, because that way it kind of gives you that timeline. So always have the plan, but never too high of the expectation for them, because you'll get what they can give you. You know, and they'll tell you that. So you want to write it down, and you also want to plan accordingly to the weather. Like right now, we're dealing with, you know, 100-degree days, blazing sun. You walk outside, you don't do anything, and you're starting to sweat. Well, you have to think about that the same way as you would for your horse. You know, if you're going to walk outside and be freezing and not want to be out there, you know, you also don't want to be out there in rain, excessive heat, excessive cold. You also need to take into consideration the footing. If you have access to a ring, or if you don't have access to a ring, you need to just come up with the plan and put everything into that plan as far as, you know, the weather, your footing, and whatnot. But the biggest thing is to have the plan right off the bat. And it's not all about competition. It's, you know, I want to be able to trot up that hill once or twice, and, you know, not having my horse laboring underneath of me. And then, you know, in 6 weeks, I want to be able to go up and down it 3 times. You know, I'm thinking, you know, like a steep hill, but you want to think of it as a track. It's not like we're going to go to the mile track up at the high school and, you know, run around it 3 times without being spit. We're going to walk around it once, and then, you know, we might jog around it once. We're not going to just go out there and start running a 3-mile track without being spit. And I also know that you might need to spend more time with one part of your plan before you go on to the next. So your horse is going to tell you, you know, if they're ready to move on to the next stage of your plan. So you don't want to say, well, you were supposed to achieve this by now, and I wanted, you know, I should be here. I'm just going to do that. You might just need to linger for a little while with one set of your plan and get that before you go on to the next set of the plan. You know, you just don't want to ask too much, because they're going to tell you they can't. And if you push, both mentally and physically, you're going to break your horse down. You're going to sour your horse. So let them tell you, okay, I've got this, and I'm ready to move on to the next one. So it's just, you're going to have to modify even if you've written down your plan, you're going to have to modify that. And change things up. You know, we're a driving club, but ride your horse, you know, take them for a hack. Do dressage under saddle with them, do trot foals. It just mix things up, because that's good. It's like, you know, CrossFit. They don't have you do the same exercise all week. One day it's cardio, one day it's weight, one day it's cardio, then weight, and they're different exercises. So make sure that you do that with your horses. Whether you, or if you're driving and you have access to go out onto the trails, go out and do hill work one day, or stay on the flat and play with dressage, play with cones. Just mix it up. Even if you don't want to ride, you can do that just in the carriage. Long line them even. So it's all about mixing it up to get every muscle on them fit. Anything on that one before we move?
Laura, this is Margaret. I would say with mixing it up, it's really great advice. It's good for them mentally as well, not just the muscle, right? So they can relax.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, that's the whole thing of not souring them mentally and physically. You want them to have fun. I don't like, you know, going to the gym and being miserable. You know, I want to be excited about, you know, what the next exercise is. So yeah, it's always a good thing to do that. And I mean, I know you, Margaret, you ride. I ride my guys. You know, it's.
We do everything. Yep.
All right. Now we go to the next one. All right. So then we get into the rest period. It's key in getting fit. You just can't drill 7 days a week. I know some people, well, they're not driving. I don't know any driving people that do it, but I've known a lot of riding competition people, riders, that they'll work their horses twice a day, which is great. You know, I mean, once the first part of the day, they might go out and have a jump school, and then 6 hours later, they'll go out and do, you know, under saddle. And I'll do that as well. I'll drive the horse in the morning or the afternoon, and then later that day, just hop on them and take them for a hack or just walk them around the barn even. So it's overworking them. You still need to give them a break because your muscles need that time off for recovery in order to get stronger. And also giving them the day off, it's a mental health day. You know, I don't want to work out 8 days a week. Hell, I don't want to ride my horses 8 days a week. You know, so giving them a day off is also giving us a day off, even though we're out there every day. But it makes it happier, you know, that way you're like, oh, I got a day off, or the day before you're going to have a day off. I mean, and horses will figure out your routine. You know, okay, this is what we do before she gives us the day off. And then they kind of get into it. So they figure out that they're going to get that day off, and it makes them happier because, you know, who doesn't like to be happy knowing they're getting a day off? So yeah, that was a short slide. Any questions on that one? All right. So then the next one is care during a rest period. And I use all of these. All of these therapies, you know, I know I like it. And I know that my horses like it because they all tell me that. I've done, I mean, the picture that I put on there is my horse wearing a Beamer blanket. So the therapies that are able and reasonably priced, you get chiropractic work, the body work, as far as one of our members, Maureen Keenan, she used the Masterson method. So I've used her to come out. Massage, I've had a lot of boarders come in and do massage. They've taught me techniques. So that's one of the techniques that I can do myself. Acupuncture, the PEMF, which is the Beamer blanket. And I've also had people come out with the machine. And just an all around spa day, you know, throw them in the bath and, you know, hit them with Sore No More. I usually use the shampoo or the gel liniment. Just a good scrub to just kind of get it all off. And when you're in there scrubbing, that's also part of the massage. But that's usually something that I plan out for the working horses, for them to at least get one of those a week. Even if it's, like I said, it's the massage that I can do some massage on my own for my guys. They at least get one of those a week. Chiropractor's out once a month when they're working. Acupuncture is usually out every 6 weeks. You know, and the Beamer blanket is when I can get there. But and you got to take care of them if you want them to last. You know, I didn't put anything in there as far as joint injections because that's really not a therapy per se in getting them fit. That's more of a maintenance thing. And another part of the rest period is just go hang out with them. You know, I mean, who's never gone out into the field and just sat there with their horse, gave them a couple of carrots and said, all right, have a good day, you know? That also makes them happy, even if it's for the 5 minutes you go out and see them. So any questions on that?
This is Margaret again. So Debbie, I know the Masterson method is awesome, right? Like you sponsored a program with BVDC last year about that. And they have a nice book where they outline things that you can do yourself with your horse that it can do no harm, right? And they love it. They do. And I'm teaching my horse to give it to me. Hasn't gotten too far yet, but you know, I'll let you keep you posted on that one. But this is all really good advice too. Yeah. Massage, acupuncture. The PEMF is the pulsing stuff, right? The MagnaWave.
Yeah. So the picture that's on my screen, that's the Beamer blanket, which is one that a lot of people use because you can just put it on, set the timer, and you know, walk away from them for, you know, the cycle. But then there's the ones that have the big hoops. and they're a little bit stronger. So like you can actually see them pulsing and watch the muscles pulse with them. And I have had people that come out with that. I mean, those machines are, you know, 12 to on up $1,000, or else I would have one. I use a friend of mine's Beamer, but because I'm not there yet, but you know, I've seen it work. I mean, even for something like an abscess, the one woman that has the machine that comes out with all the hoops and stuff, she'll blow abscesses out for people in one treatment.
No kidding.
Yeah, like, so if you have that really stubborn abscess that won't come out, that you've been soaking for however long, if you
Ever.
find somebody that has a PEMF machine, they've had it blow an abscess out. It's crazy.
Good to know.
All right, so next one is on cooling your horse down. So just like you'd warm them up, it's not like you're going to get on your horse or get behind your horse and, you know, yeah, go. You warm your horse up. And part of how I warm them up and how I cool them down is I will always start out, whether I'm riding them or driving them, I'll even walk them around with all their tack before I get on them or before I put them to the carriage. But so just as important as that is, it's just as important to do it to cool them down. So usually when they're in the tack, whether you're hooked to the carriage or whether you're on, you want to get your respiratory rate reasonable before you go back to the barn. Nobody wants to take their horse back on. So then the only reason I say respiratory rate is because that's the one thing that we can monitor while we're on them or while we're behind them, because we can feel it with our leg or we can see it with our eyes. We're not going to be able to tell what their heart rate is or their temperature is while we're working them. So that's one thing that we can judge. I mean, they could be all sweaty and have a low respiratory rate, which means that they're cooling down. So if their respiratory rate is reasonable, that's usually when I wait before I get them back to the barn. And in doing that, most of the time I hack out, you know, and that's usually when they're going to have a higher respiratory rate, rather than me staying at the barn and doing, you know, flat work or dressage work in the carriage. And I know my cool out time. I know I'm going to walk back to the barn starting right here, either under the saddle or in the carriage. And that's in multiple directions going back to my barn. You know, I know a lot of people drive out of Fair Hill and go out for fun days like that. So you kind of have to judge how far away am I from my trailer or how far away I am from my barn to know that you're going to need, you know, am I going to need 10 minutes for the respiratory rate to get down or not? You know, and plus heading back on a loose rein in the carriage or under saddle, it's just going to make them a lot happier. Like, oh, I'm done working, I can walk out. And you let them stretch their head down, because stretching their head down is going to stretch their whole top line, which is going to, their muscles are going to thank you for that. So, you know, you never want to take them back to the barn. You know, I'm going to be up here and round and on the bit. Just get them nice and long and low, again, under saddle or in the carriage. And then once you do get them back to the barn, the first thing I always do, and I always have a bucket of water right there, is as soon as the bridle's off of them, and I, you know, I'll loosen the girth, you know, a couple holes or whatnot as I'm unhooking them or after I get off of them. But I take the bridle off, boom, the bucket's right in their face. You know, because I at least want them to rinse their mouth out. They've had the bit in their mouth. You know, you just kind of want to get that taste out of their mouth, and also throw some water to them. And that's any temperature. It can be hot, it can be cold. I always offer them water. And then you also want to use your judgment whether you want to hit the wash stall or not. If it's hot out, you're going to want to get them right in the wash stall. If it's cold outside and you don't have the facility to put a cooler on them, put them under a heat lamp or leave them in or whatnot, you just kind of depend all of that on the weather. So if you're in a spot where your horse didn't sweat a whole lot, you just took them for, you know, a walk around the field or whatnot, and they're not really that sweaty, I'll at least rub them with a towel, hit them with a curry, just, you know, you want to rub their body, get the sweat marks off, get any water off, and it feels good on their muscles. You know, you're massaging them at that point too. So I just don't hose a horse off, sweat scrape them and check them out. I'll hose them off, sweat scrape them, and then I'll grab them with a towel and I'll rub all over them with the towel. But I'll also do that even if I don't hit the wash saw. It just makes their body feel a little bit better. You know, and then I'll usually take them out. If it was a hard work day, I have a stress day, my fitness day. I'll usually take them out for a little hand graze before I go out and put them back out in the field with their guys. That's also, that goes with the whole mental health day. You know, you spend a couple minutes with your horse after you've worked them. Let them have a hand graze because the grass is always greener on the other side, so they're going to think they're getting something special. So, you know, you making them happy is the biggest thing in getting them fit, and it goes along with every slide of this, is having your horse happy. So usually the last thing is, you know, or one of the things in it is something that makes them happy. So I always like to spend time with them anyway. So anything on this one?
Yeah, this is Debbie. Your idea of giving them a bucket of water right away, I found another benefit of that, because I do that as well. I found that it makes it easier when I'm at a show and I'm, you know, bringing my horse back to the trailer and I want him to drink water. And you know how hard it is sometimes at a show to get them to drink, but by getting him in the habit, kind of like, you know, the bridle comes off and here's a bucket of water, and he does that readily at home.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of instilling in him a little bit of a routine that he'll tend to drink more when he's away as well.
Right.
That's a good idea. It's worked well for me.
I always offer them water. I'll even get into the habit sometimes of offering them water before they're unhooked. If I have somebody on the ground, I'll get one of my sauce buckets that I use when I'm at the rest stop, that they can get up their whole bridle in, especially if we're driving with the Liverpool. And I'll have somebody throw that up to them, because again, on our rest in marathon, before we go out for obstacle section, you want them to drink. So yeah, that's the same thing. You just train them here. I put a bucket in there, at least take a sip.
Yeah.
Something that Lisa Singer taught me was regarding like washing the horse. I found with driving, well, I'm digressing here, but I found with driving that, especially where I was boarding, was at the top of a hill. So even though you were cooled out, you had to trot up the hill to get up the hill because it was very steep. So we were out of breath at the top, and washing the horse with cold water cools them down even faster. So then just walking slowly, although I try to walk like the last mile home. But the other thing she said to me was, in the winter, particularly, I found this worked really well, was to have a spray bottle, half of wintergreen alcohol and half of water. And so late winter, let's say March, my horse is second clipped. And so she's got really short hair at that point, but she still sweats, particularly under the tack. So I spray her lightly with the alcohol mix and towel it all off till she's dry. And that helps dry it off really well, which is pretty good, because then I can just put a cooler on her till she's dry and then put her blankets back on. But I found that to be real helpful, because it kind of helps kill the bacteria in case it's wet, because it's easy to put a wet blanket on a horse and get rain rot. So I don't know, I pass that along.
That's good. Yeah, I'd never heard the half and half. I know using alcohol, you know, for tightening up legs and stuff, but not the half and half for, you know, winter time and cooling them out.
Yeah, the idea of cooling them down with water, there's been a lot of tendency to talk about this water on, water off method.
That's on the next.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll say.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Well, I there was a research done, a study done, and I think it might have been like back when the Olympics were in Atlanta, when they were
Right,
really hot.
1996.
Yeah. They were saying that they tested I think it was 4 different methods of cooling a horse, and they would take their temperature, you know, they just came back from a marathon or whatever, and take their temperature and then use each of these different methods and see which one reduced the temperature the fastest. And I think one of the things was just walking the horse, you know, not doing anything else, just walking them until they would cool out. Another one was just putting a fan on them. Another one was the water on, water off constantly, like just wet them quickly, then scrape the water off, then wet them again quickly, then scrape the water off. And then another one was just hosing them continuously with cold water for like 5 minutes until they cooled down, and then scraping them when you're done. But, you know, a steady stream of water over, especially over where you can see the veins close to the surface of the skin, because that'll carry the cold temperature more quickly to the rest of their body. So that was the one that they found was the fastest. That's what I've been doing, is just keep that cold water all over their body for like a good 5 or 10 minutes, rather than stopping and scraping and, you know, water on, water off quickly.
Right.
And
And
that works well if you have a hose, but if you're out in the field with a
Oh
bucket,
yeah, I know, it's hard with a bucket of water.
I still scrape it off, because that water heats up quickly and then it's just sitting there. So I scrape it off and put more cold water on until the water runs off their body cool. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, right. I agree with the idea that, you know, just leaving it on, you notice that it gets hot, and you know, it's all about transferring heat away from the body. So, you know, that makes sense that you'd want to scrape it off. I think the difference was in the methods that I was talking about was, you know, some people just put it on real quick, just get them wet and then scrape, and then get them wet again, scrape. And they're saying that the continuous application of cold water is going to get that temperature down faster. And then when you're all done and you think they're cooled down, then scrape off the excess.
Right. And colder water cools them down quicker too. I mean, when they're hot, like I've bought bags of ice to take with me, and I just pour the bag of ice into my water and wash them in ice water. Because owning a heavy draft horse pony, I mean, she puffs a lot. And if I want her to quit panting, I got to use some really cold water. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, you know, when we compete and we're out on marathon, there's not always a hose at our first vet box. And that's when, you know, I have these big buckets and I can one-hand them and I'm sponging, and they're easy to refill, because I usually, when you go into the vet box, you want to stay by the water so you can get your bucket full, and I'll go in one spot, like on here, it says, get your water where it's going to make the difference. I'll go up in their jawline and their throat area and down their neck. I'll get in the armpit right there at the girth, and then right between their legs. You know, most of the time you have to teach them, you know, because when we're out on, you know, on our first vet check, we're going to be, you know, still hooked to our carriage. So you have to kind of teach them the groin area, but hitting them in those spots specifically, because that's where it's all going to go, you know, right back to where it needs to go, you know, to get in the blood and getting them cooled down. But I'll, you know, sponge that whole bucket in each of those sections, and then wipe it with the sponge, wring the sponge out. You know, instead of using a sweat scraper, I'll wring them off with the sponge, and then grab another bucket and go to the next area. Everybody thinks, oh, I'll get it on top, and you watch them pour the buckets over their horses. Number one, it shocks them, and their whole body dips down, because you're dropping, you know, 10 pounds of water on their back while they're hooked or while they're not hooked. But then when you have access to, when you're done the obstacle section, you get back and you get your vet check, and they tell you, you know, all right, just hose them off or bring them back in 10 minutes. That's when I'll go back, and, you know, as we know, when we compete, you know, if you have a horse that just came in and your horse is pulled out, they get the hose. You're not filling your water buckets at your stall when somebody needs the hose. And then I'll hit them in the girth area, in the groin area, get them up on their neck, so that'll cool them down better. So, because usually your respiratory rate's down by the time you get to that point. You know, all the marathons I've come in off of, you know, they come in and they're, you know, huffing and puffing, and your respiratory rate, you know, 50, 60, whatnot, you know, depending on what kind of marathon you ran. By the time you get them walked back up to the barn, unhooked, unharnessed, you know, back, walked over to the wash stall. I mean, you're not, you know, fiddling around and taking your time, but that all takes time. So by the time you get them to the water, you're halfway there, and you just want to cool them out at that point. But also there's the whole thing of, you know, the water, you know, getting it on them, just like you want to get it on them, you want to get it in them. Like how I offer them the bucket of water on back. There's a lot of people say, oh, you can't let them drink, you know, a whole bucket as soon as they get back. And I've talked to vets, and they say, if they want to chug that whole bucket, let them chug that whole bucket. You know, and then you keep them walking so that it's not sloshing around in there and getting heavy. You know, because a lot of people, oh, if you put, you know, a 5-gallon bucket of water in them, it's going to make them colic. And I'm sitting here going, usually when they tube them for an impaction or, you know, an upset stomach, they're usually putting water in there. So, you know, I've been told a couple different ways, but if I have a horse that wants, you know, oh, moderately let them drink, I'll let them drink the whole bucket if they want to, coming off the marathon or even coming off of a stress day. All right. And then the next one, so the signs of distress. And number one is we all know our horses. You know, we know when they're in distress, because not all of these are going to be your specific horse's sign of distress. They might have something that's a little bit different. And you don't list all of these. These are just like the common ones, but the biggest thing is knowing your horse, knowing when they don't feel good. If you're used to having your horse, you know, pre-work, post-work, and they're standing at their stall door, or they're standing in the wash tub, and they're usually all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but you might notice something different. Their head standing in the corner or whatnot. That could be a sign of distress for your horse too. But as far as, you know, signs of distress, a high respiratory rate. So anything over 30, I mean, now this is a little bit of Jamie's expertise, but we should all know, every horse person should know how to take their horse's respiratory rate, their heart rate, and know what a normal, you know, breath per minute, beats per minute, and know what a normal temperature is for their animal. So a high respiratory rate, anything over 30, heart rate, anything over 40, and temperatures, anything over 101.5. Another sign of distress is if they're not cooling down for you in a reasonable amount of time. Usually 10, 15 minutes, you'll notice some kind of change. Even if they go from a respiratory rate of 30 to 25, it's still changing in that 10 minutes. Another sign of distress is when they're really, really sweaty, dripping sweat. Even though right now, today, my horses came in to eat and they were in a stall for 5 minutes. They were dripping sweat because it's so humid. But as far as after they've been working, you know, if they're really, really dripping sweat or foamy, with the high respiratory rate and the heart rate or whatnot, and also no sweating. If your horse is out there working for a half an hour and there's not even a dampness underneath the saddle pad, that's not good. Sweating's how they cool themselves off, how their muscles cool off. So if you have too much or none at all, that's not good. So that's a sign of distress. And then also there's tying up, which will present like colic symptoms. They get really stretchy, they get choky on catching their breath, pacing, they want to get down, they want to get up, they're really uncomfortable. You know, and not every horse is going to tie up the same way. So again, it's colic symptoms, but it's more of a stress colic, you know, as far as them not feeling good. Because again, like if you go out and, oh, I can run a mile around the track, let me enter this 5K, you get to the end of the 5K, you're just going to hit the dirt. So that's basic, you know, and you get all crampy and stuff. So you have to make sure that you know all the signs of your horse.
So
Alright.
Laura, when you say signs of distress, do you really mean signs of stress? Because I mean, if you come off a marathon, you're definitely going to have heart rate higher than 40.
Right, but some horses will come off a marathon and distress is, you know, and stress are two different things. So, you know, they're not stressed out that they just ran a marathon. A lot of times they're geared up, like, yeah, I just did that. But the distress is their high respiratory rate and their heart rate and their temperature. And, you know, if you're not getting them cooling down in that time period, then, you know, in that like 10 to 15 minute and noticing some kind of change, then that would be your distress, which then turns into stress if they start tying up. You know, I've done marathons with my mare, Vicky. She's, you know, well retired from competing now, but she was super fit, and I was down at Southern Pines, and I came off of section E, and the person at the vet box goes, the vet box for section D is over there. And I'm going, I just got done running marathon. And they're like, but the vet for section D is over there. I'm like, no, we're filthy. We just went through and ran obstacles. But, you know, so she had a high, you know, high heart rate and a high respiratory rate, but she came in all, you know, la-di-da-di-da, I just ran a marathon. And they're trying to send me over to, because they are seeing all these other horses coming in off a marathon. I'm going, oh my God, I need my stall, I need my hose. So every horse is going to come off of working out differently than others.
So the rates that you have here are really like after you've cooled them down, and it, you know, maybe it's 20 or 30 minutes after you had the vet check. It's not at the vet check.
Oh yeah, no, I've
Okay.
come into a vet box with an 80 heart rate.
Yeah.
And, you know, I go back 10 minutes later and they're like, all right, cool. You know, your
Right.
heart rate, you know, down to, you know, even if at that point it's down to 50 after 10, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
you know,
It's coming down. Yeah.
And sometimes that is, it's not so much that they're not fit. Sometimes that turns into anxiety, which is
Mhm.
a whole another ball of wax. Sometimes when
Yeah.
they get, so I mean, I could add anxiety to this. It just, you know, will add to the sign of distress. And one thing that I use, I mean, even for recovery on the marathon is magnesium. It'll help them recover better, kind of calms them down. It's good for their muscles even too. Like I won't touch a show without using my NutriFeed. I don't use it every day because my horses don't need magnesium every day. When they go to a show, they're in a different element. Even when they're a seasoned show horse, I'll put the magnesium in them just to even prevent all this from happening and keep their muscles happy. But, you know, you just keep them happy, and, you know you're going to come in off of a marathon, whether it's a pleasure marathon or a CDE marathon, you know you're going to come in above these rates. But the biggest thing is the fourth point, if they're not going to cool down within 10, 15 minutes.
Yep. Got it.
What's the name of the product you use, the magnesium product?
Oh, I use NutriFeed. I mean, hands down, I mean, I have a case, well, not a case, I have a box of it at the barn. If I go to a show, it doesn't matter who I'm showing, or you know, I'll even give it to Jamie's ponies. They're either going to use it, you know, if they start to get nervous or whatnot, or their body needs it, they'll use the magnesium. If they don't need it, then it just goes right through them. You're not overdosing them on anything. They either need it and use it, or they don't.
Thank you.
It's FEI legal. So. All right. And then we're going to the last slide of when to call a vet. We all know our horses tell us when we need to call the vet. You know, so you have that. But if they're tying up, if you don't get any kind of change within 10 or 15 minutes, or if they come up and they're lame, which doesn't necessarily have to be, I mean, your lameness could be a muscle lameness as well. You know, that whole thing of keeping their bodies happy. You know, I massage my horses all the time. You know, that's one of the reasons we use a curry comb when we're getting them ready and why we brush them. Same reason as to why we do it when we're done. But the whole thing of when to call a vet, any good horse person and competitor is going to know when they need to call a vet. So, you know, that was one of the points on need to call a vet. Let's discuss that. And again, we all know when we need to. And that goes into the signs of distress slide that I had. If you're not getting everything recovered and back down within 10, 15 minutes, some horses might require, you know, they might tell you, you know, put ice boots on them, take them for, you know, a non-stop walk. Don't let them stop and graze. Just keep them moving, keep them moving. And or you might even need to put fluids to them. I've seen that at shows before as well, where the vet has had to come down and they hang IV fluids for them in the stall. You know, just because they get so dehydrated, they might need electrolytes, they might need any, you know, something else, just to get them going and recovered.
So speaking of electrolytes, is that a part of your routine when you compete?
I'll usually throw electrolytes at them to get them to sweat. Yeah, depending on, you know, well, depending on the horse. If my horse, if I know they're going to drink, if I'm going training level, I'm not going to throw electrolytes at them. When I was competing Vicky and I was at intermediate level, I would give her electrolytes in. Or when they are working, you know, if I do a lot of stress days, I'll throw it in their grain at home, but I do show with it. But one thing I will show with as well, and, you know, I don't have it open in the trailer, is I'll take, if it's a 3-day show, I'll go and I'll get a pack of Guinness and I'll throw a Guinness stout in her food. That helps her sweat as well. And that's the old, you know, the wives' tale, you know, good luck, give them a Guinness, helps them sweat, you know. But I'll put Guinness to her as well.
So I thought you give a horse electrolytes that is a sweater. Like my horse is a sweater. Humidity, he sweats. So I was sort of under the impression that I'm giving him electrolytes to basically put back in what he keeps sweating out.
Does he drink though?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if he's, I don't really worry about daily electrolytes if I know they're a drinker. But if I go to a show and I know it's going to be a stressed situation,
Okay.
I'll usually put electrolytes to them. Just like the only time they get a beer is when I show.
That's an incentive.
I should give them the beer afterwards, not before. but yeah, you know,
Do they
Gatorade.
like beer?
Pardon?
Do they like beer?
Oh, Vicky eats it like crazy. Oh yeah, every horse I've ever given a Guinness to, I pour it right over their grain, head in the bucket.
Okay, so you put it over their grain, not in their water.
No, not in their water. No, I'll pour that over their grain, and that'll help her sweat. You can give them electrolytes. When I'm shipping, because I do so much of the shipping, I don't carry the tub of electrolytes with me in the trailer, but I'll throw Gatorade in their water bucket as well to replace the electrolytes, Gatorade or Pedialyte, whatever the truck stop has.
So when you put the beer in, is it like a cup or is it a whole bottle?
Oh, I'll give them the whole bottle.
Okay.
Yep, whole bottle, whole can, whatever, you know, suits you, you know. Before she got bred, I gave her a beer, but that was just, I mean, but yeah, no, Vicky loves her beer. Just like dogs drink beer, horses will drink beer. So, that's all. Now that's all I really have on the whole how to get them fit. The biggest thing is you know, making sure they're here mentally and they're ready for what you're going to do. Making sure you're not pushing them too hard physically, and making sure you take care of them. The whole cooling down, giving them the water, giving them the day off, any kind of therapies that you want to do. You got to communicate with your horse, and they communicate back to us.
was a good job.
Yeah, this is very comprehensive. Thank you.
Do they still talk about doing trot sets, or I don't know if they even do trot sets in the carriage world?
You mean
I can try that.
like interval training, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the whole coming up with the plan, you know.
okay,
So I know you go to Fair Hill a lot, and so if your plan is, you know, you go off of Gallagher Road, say, okay, I'm going to go into the gates, I'm going to turn right, and I'm going to walk until I get, you know, up by that the old winery hazard that's on the top. You're
Right.
going off the Gallagher and go up top. I'm going to walk until I get to there, and then I'm going to ask her to trot for, you know, 5 minutes, you know, depending on where you are in their fitness. I'm going to ask her to trot for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to ask her to walk for 2. And then, okay, here we are, another spot. You kind of have to have that game plan. It can't be trotting for, you know, 10 miles, and then I'm going to let her walk for 1 mile. You do that whole interval training, like,
right,
yeah, it's like CrossFit. So you have 2 minutes to do one exercise, and then you give yourself a break, and then they give you another 2 minutes, and you go back to it, or you do another exercise, one or the other. And that's what helps you get fit the most, is doing that interval training.
Yeah, actually, Lisa Singer had given us a talk on fitness, you know, getting your horse fit. And it was many, many years ago, but I wrote up her notes, and she had a table where she kind of said, you know, week 1, it would be like, you know, 5 minutes trot, 5 minutes walk, 5 minutes trot, 5 minutes walk. And then each week she would just increase some of it a little bit. So you got to like week 10 or 12 or something like that. So that's actually in our reference page in the website. So I will maybe even republish that in the newsletter for people that don't remember it from many years ago. But it's a nice guide. Like Laura said, it's a plan. So, you know, you might not follow it. You might have to do 2 weeks in a row of the same, you know, numbers, but it's a way to gradually increase their fitness with the interval training.
That's like going back to, you know, the level of fitness you had at the end of the season is not the one that you had at the new one. So you might, you know, once they've been fit, it's going to be real easy to get them back to that point. So, you know, you might end up spending, you know, 3 days on the 5 minute, 5 minute, 5 minute, 5 minute. And then, you know, after 3 days, of course, going, we've already done this. And then you can get to, you know, 5 minutes to walk, 10 minutes to trot, 5 minutes to walk, 10 minutes to trot. You know, so you modify your plan. We all know our horses. We know where they were at the end of the last season. We even know where they were, you know, after a rest day, to where we pick up. And that's that whole thing of have the plan and write it down. Biggest thing. And that's what, you know, Lisa did. Like, you know, this is the best way to get your horse fit, this way, that way. Have that plan.
Yeah, and this is not just for competitions. It's, you know, if you're somebody who likes to do cross-country pleasure drives, you know, I know there's one coming up at the Laurels, and, you know, these are going to be, you know, 7, 8 miles long or whatever. So, you know, there probably will be some hills. So if you have an enjoyable time and you want your horse to enjoy it, you want him to be fit enough to deal with those kind of pleasure drives.
Oh, yeah. Or even just, you know, when I drive out of my barn, or when, you know, everybody drives out of Fairhill, that's not a pleasure drive, and you can do any pace you want to.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to do the little trail all the time. You want to do the big trail. Like, we have a couple spots out of our place, and based off of time that we have, or the fitness level of them, we have our short, we have our long short, we have our medium long, and then we have we're going out for 6.5 miles type of a day. You know, so that's part of my plan. Like, okay, for a week, I'm going to do the short or this short. I have different areas that I can go. So. All right.
Do you have?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, just as an aside, one of my daughters was a very active eventer, with a thoroughbred that had very thin hoof walls that he tended to go lame. And what we did, and we ran into, I don't know who, somebody who was a carriage competitor. But anyway, we used to take the horse swimming a couple times a week. And boy, did he get fit that way. He came off that cross-country course and he was hardly breathing heavily, you know. I mean,
You have to have them fit going into the pool because the pool is so hard for them.
yes, even once around is tough. So you can't just take but you know, he had a pretty good base. But we were going down to, one of the places we were going was down to the Virginia Horse Park, which is at the base of the Appalachians. And that course is pretty hilly. But yeah, that's an alternative. It's not a cheap alternative, but it does really get them fit.
If it keeps them from breaking down, it's not, you know, I'll take my horse $40 swimming if it keeps them from tying up. You know, anything like that. Well, nothing's cheap in the horse world. I mean, all the therapies that I have on the where is it? On, oh, wait a minute, where are we at? On this one, none of this is cheap. You know, and it's not cheap for reasons because it works, you know.
So I have a question. After you've had a stress day, I mean, like a really, you know, where it's been maybe 20 minutes of trot, 10 minutes of walk, 20 minutes of trot, you know, it's like an hour total, it's a hot day, whatever. Do you like how soon would you do another stress day? Do you like want to leave, you know, make sure you leave a week in between, or?
It really depends on the fitness level of your horse, even at that point, and what your plan is. When Vicky was going and she was intermediate, so she was like super stinking fit. I'd take her to Fair Hill. I would say at least every weekend she was going to Fair Hill. If I had an opportunity during the week, she was going back down to Fair Hill or doing a mild stress day, so to speak. But the stress days that I usually do, and what I build up to, I want to make sure, so, you know, your average marathon for combined driving, you know, your first section, I want to at least get her to do, you know, 6 or 7K trot after a walk warm up. And then I'll at least get her to do a 1K walk, you know, and not, I'll basically mock out a marathon on my stress days. And when I can come in off of doing the third section, now when I go out and do stress days, I don't necessarily hit the vet box in between the third section. So I won't hit her with water, but I will do the 10-minute walkout or the 1K walkout, and then I'll walk her around and get her to cool down, but I'll build up to that. So I might do 3K of trot and then do 1K of walk type of a thing, and build up to that.
1,000 kilometers or 1 kilometer. Laura, how long is a typical marathon?
It all depends on the course. Sometimes, and it all depends on your level as well. You know, so we all know that we have the transfer section, which used to be section D. We all know that that's always 1 kilometer. Sometimes they'll do modified to where you have the control warm up.
It's 8 o'clock.
Pardon? Oh, that was the Zoom. Okay. But they have the modified warm up, and like I did Tryon with Lisa Stroud, and she was intermediate, and they had the controlled warm up. And you're basically just in there for your controlled warm up time, your 10 minutes. You can do whatever you want to do. You walk, trot, canter, and then they check in, and then they send you down to go start marathon.
Well, Laura, are we talking about 6 miles, 12 miles, 8 miles?
So with the controlled warm up, it's 10 minutes. You don't have to go a certain amount of time. You can be in there just standing your horse if you want to in the controlled warm up. But in the typical CBE, you're going to be 5 to 6, 6.5 in the first section, and then you have kilometers. And then you have your 1 kilometer walk or
Not very
transfer
long.
section. And then usually your third section with the obstacles would be, 6.5 kilometers. But again, it depends on your level. If you have, 4 obstacles versus 6 obstacles, depending on your level, and depending on your KPH and all that.
And I think what he wants is the total, and it's usually around 10 kilometers when you add it all up. 10 to 12.
Average 10 to 12, yeah, on average. Again, it depends on the facility. It depends on the format of the show.
Yeah, and whether you're training or advanced.
Yeah, but the controlled warm-up it's becoming more and more. I couldn't believe at Tryon that they had controlled warm-up, but we were in one of the grass arenas. And 10 minutes, there's your controlled warm-up. You're going to know when your horse is warmed up to go do marathon, which, it was fine until, you get to the end and your cool out is, but yeah, it all depends on the show, how long kilometer wise your course is.
And as you mentioned, what your KPH is, so the higher the level, the faster you have to go to make the time. So yeah, it's not just a matter of distance.
Yeah. It's how fast you gotta be going, because training, you're only allowed to trot. It all just depends. But the new controlled warm up is, I miss sections. It's better for the horses, in my honest opinion.
Yeah, I know. Just wandering around in a field is stupid.
For 10 minutes. And at Tryon, Tryon was really hard. I want my horse going, all right, cool, I'm ready to go and warmed up, just not, tootling around.
Yeah, I know. It's not like they don't have the land.
Yeah.
When you bring a horse back, and the horse is thirsty, he's sweating and so forth, do you wait a while before you let him drink?
They're going to tell you if they're thirsty or not. Just every horse is going to be different. It's just like people. You see the people that, and even people that I've worked out with and done CrossFit, some people, after you get done that exercise, that stress day or whatnot, so to speak, there's some people that are just laying flat out, controlling their respiratory rate. And it's like, don't touch me. And then you have the other people that are going over and they're just pounding their water bottle down. But I always, when they get back and they're unhooked and the bridle's off and that girth's unhooked, I'll at least throw the bucket up into their mouth and let them rinse their mouth out. Everybody's like, oh, they're not drinking. And that's why I have the soft buckets the whole, opening of it, it's huge. And I'll just shove their whole mouth into it, just to get them to even think about starting to drink. But yeah, no, I usually always teach them drink as soon as they get back. And if it's like at a horse show where, I need to get the hose on them as well to get them back to the vet box and get them cooled down and every, respiratory pulse, everything's high, I'll even throw the hose in their mouth and let them drink out of the hose. Every horse I've ever competed, every horse I ever owned, every horse I've ever personally dealt with will drink out of a hose. All right. Anything else?
You got your question answered? Yeah, something else. Debbie, you mentioned the Laurels. This weekend on the 30th, we have a short drive of 4.5 mile, maybe, pleasure drive. BBDC is offering that, and that's a very nice drive, mainly level ground. It's a good trip for a lot of horses that may not be all that fit. And then, of course, Debbie, as you know, we have and all of you, we have a pleasure drive on the, I believe it's going to be the 16th of October at Warwick Furnace in northern Chester County. That's more of a 7.5 mile drive with a rest stop. A beautiful country in the fall.
Yep. So if you want to go, get your horse fit for the mileage.
Yeah, well, it's not too bad. It's, you know, some ups and downs, but it's, for the most part, it's, any horse should be able to do it. It's in October.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if you've been driving all summer, you should be able to drive 7.5 miles, and it's macadam country road. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah. Thank
You're
you very
welcome.
much.
Have fun with your horses and listen to your horses. I know we all do. I know enough of y'all.
Good dialogue. Thanks,
All right.
everybody, for joining.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
See ya.
Good night. Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Laura. That was great.
Welcome.